Hi, everyone. I'm Marshall Dawson. Today is Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. What you're about to see is a discussion that I had with Dave Walden yesterday. And for a little context, Dave is nearing completion on his first book. And we've been toying with the idea of wouldn't it be interesting if we could augment that book with some video clips? And so, as you'll see, we are still trying to sort out what form that might take. But in the meantime, enjoy the discussion. Introduce you as my friend Dave Walden, who
Okay.
I first met through Toastmasters, but actually, Dave, I first heard you and experienced you speaking at a Liberty on the Rocks event where you were debating anarchy versus minarchy. I don't know if you recall that particularly.
You know, I do. I was with John Kranz, wasn't I?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I haven't seen John in forever.
Yeah, and the professor from CU, Michael Humer.
That sounds familiar.
I believe, that was a good while ago, Marshall. I don't remember you before Toastmasters.
Well, you wouldn't have had any reason to pick me out of that crowd that was there that night. But that was the first Liberty on the Rocks event that I went to.
Okay.
I guess Terry had been to a few, so. she
Yeah, there
convinced
was
me
a
to go.
young man there as well that was associated with Liberty on the Rocks in Denver, and he has since married and moved off to somewhere. Very bright kid, I remember.
I can't remember his name.
No, I can't either, but he was on the anarchy side,
Yeah.
and I was on the limited government side. Yeah, I remember him. Yep.
I was going through some recordings yesterday, just trying to, clean up and rename stuff that's on my hard drive, and and coordinating with that, and I guess trying to coalesce stuff, trying to figure out what is out on the internet, because I'd helped Mike Shelton do some edits as well.
Okay. I don't
And-
even know where Mike is now.
Well, I was going to say, I think I found that speech. I didn't go and listen, or not speech, but the debate. I didn't go and listen to it. But now that I think about it, I'll send you a link to it if you're
Yeah,
interested.
Mike was what, city council for a couple of terms here in Broomfield, or one at least, and he didn't run again. He didn't want to, but I used to chat with him often. He'd have some interesting stories about Broomfield's governance.
We connected, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months ago, because he, if you remember when Sean started trying to record Liberty Toastmasters speeches, and he was
Okay.
playing with his iPhone, and what if we had a better microphone? Well, I knew that that Mike had, the microphone that he used there, the camera, which was half Liberty Toastmasters, and we just never got it back. So I connected with Mike to see if we could get that. If he's anything like me, he doesn't want that junk sitting around.
Yeah, I'm like that too.
So he said that the camera had broken. He had offered that to some neighbor kid. If he could figure out how to make it work, he could have it. So I do have the microphones and cables and various accessories and things like that. But I can remember Mike had a lot of problems with audio. Serious buzzing and things like that. And so, I've got that down in my basement. I have the same problems, and I just kind of got tired of fighting with it. So
So you have a basement in your house?
I do have a basement. Yeah, it's a full basement.
You could turn that into a studio.
Well, it sort of is, except that it's not really decorated. I had placed a standing table, that's adjustable, right? You can raise it up and down, and that's in front of a green screen, which that green fabric is covering over a white screen. So I do have the ability to do that.
I think that's all that Independence has. They don't have, they have a nice building there
Mhm.
and a lot of nice facilities, but I don't think their recording studio is other than just what is necessary and to make it unremarkable.
I believe that they have a set. So if you know where the restrooms are,
Yeah.
if you keep going back there,
Yep.
you get to a locked door, and it's really dark in there. But if you struggle, you can see, the sofa and the cameras and some equipment and things like that. So they keep it set up. I'm just too cheap to put up real walls and buy furniture. So maybe someday. And it's cold down there too. That's
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah.
the other thing.
That's part of it, sure.
Well, Dave, you have been writing a book, as I understand it. And the first part of that book is your journey. I was
Yeah.
thinking that we could maybe talk about some of the things that interest you that didn't quite make the cut getting into the book. Maybe some of the things that I
Well,
found interesting.
in thinking about that, Marshall, and what we're doing here, there I am with a Toastmasters.
You need a grammarian here.
I don't know. I mean, what I want to do is I primarily want this addition to this, well, potential addition to this book, to just add to the value it may be seen as in the eyes of my daughter and granddaughters. Because, as I say in the beginning of the book, what even alerted me to potentially doing this was my wife's regret after her father died that she hadn't asked him more questions about his life before he died. Now she's able to ask her mother, but her mother doesn't know some of those answers either. And so Julie will never have answers to them, and she regrets that. So Julie suggested to me, and I had thought of it, that maybe if I could head something like that off with my daughter and granddaughters, that might be a useful legacy to them. So basically, my motivation for writing this is just to document what I think is or are the significant events of my life and why, without making it too heavy or reading, because you know me well enough to know that I like ideas and philosophy and the more weighty of topics other than the events of my life.
A couple of years back, our friend Rich made a recommendation to me. He said, when you go back home for Christmas, make a point of recording your parents, because I think at that time maybe his father, who had passed, probably didn't have but another 6 months. And, of course, great advice. I hadn't done it, but, that conversation with Rich actually is one of the reasons that I was somewhat eager to try to help you with this, because of your motivation and trying to pass that along to your family and perhaps for generations to come. They'll have the opportunity to not just hear but see you and maybe hear some of these stories, some of the things that have a little bit finer points of interest but maybe don't necessarily make it into the book.
Right. Well, that's, as I was rereading the prologue to this book, it occurred to me, I've said pretty much what I wanted to say in the book, but for Jesse and Mia and Ava, what might I add that may not be obvious or clear to them? They may not pick it up. And in reading the prologue, and then the first section, which is on my parents and how essentially they became my parents, I wanted to say that in summary, Jess, Mia, Ava, my mother was not a happy person. Now, she may have come across like that as being happy, because one of her primary motivations and values was what other people thought of her. And so when she was ever in an environment where other people would have the opportunity to watch her or listen to her or judge her, she always tried to come across as happy. But she wasn't. And of course that she shared in her home, day in, day out, during my years there when I was growing up. So I'm sure that is part of the reason that early in the book I acknowledge that I got off to a bad start, because the bottom line for me, as best I can remember, was I had little respect for almost any adult. They just seemed to me to be phony. You couldn't necessarily believe what they said. You couldn't count on what they said they'd do, and that included not just my mom and dad, their friends, neighbors, police, teachers, even. I would find the dark cloud in whatever silver lining I was presented with. And that's part of what I became as a pre- and post-pubescent before I left home. So having said that, that set the stage for the rest of my journey.
You said that your mother really cared about what other people thought of her. And, I don't know how common that would have been back then. I don't know that I observed it a whole lot. But I wonder how much of a parallel there is to today with younger people who are just addicted to social media. They're trying to live up to some ideal that they see out there online, people posting and portraying lives that aren't real, and trying to live up to that, and not having self-value if, some of these kids think that, people don't have a high opinion of them.
Well, what is happening with that question, Marshall, is just what I thought was going to happen during this conversation.
Should I apologize, or should I gloat?
But why I'm bringing that up as my answer is because, or my response, is because in this journey, I have tried to keep it as light as possible. And what you're asking me, my mind immediately goes to philosophy. And how I would answer that to someone that I know you are. You're interested in ideas. You have the capability of grasping and understanding them. And that interest in them prompts those kinds of questions. And my first thought when you asked that was, well, Marshall, everyone must have, by some definition, self-esteem. And there's only two places to get it. You either get it from inside you, or you get it from outside you. Now, truth be known, self-esteem is composed of two components. One's view of one's capability and one's view of one's worthiness. I mean, if you believe you are capable of doing anything that you set your mind to do, and that having done it, you're worthy of the results, whatever they might be, well, your self-esteem is hard, unshakable, and it comes from within you. Conversely, if your view of your capability is affirmed or reconfirmed by the opinions of others, the judgments of others, then you will know, because you're the only one that knows inside you what's going on. You will know that your worthiness only comes from other people's opinion. So your self-esteem will be fleeting, uncertain, and subject to the latest opinion of the latest person in your life that you value enough to be in your life. So my answer to you is that what is going on now in social media is probably my mother in spades in the minds of those people who haven't figured out that self-esteem can only come from inside you.
Well, I guess as much as she struggled with that, if she had had social media and, all of those influences back then, she might have really been a train wreck.
might have been a train wreck, or well, if I would argue that if your self-esteem is not sourced internally, you are always a potential train wreck waiting to happen.
Yeah.
The only thing at issue is the severity of the wreck. So my mother got her self-esteem, her sense of capability and worthiness from others. Now, she knew she was capable in certain things. I mean, she held a job most of her life having to do with fabrics and sewing. Her last job that I at least am aware of before she retired, she was more or less the department manager in a Sears store of the fabric section. And everyone would come to her for questions and so forth and so on. So she knew she was capable in that regard. And there were other things. She was a great cook. Hated housework, was terrible at it. And she would, as I mentioned in the book to Jesse and Ava and Mia, she always would remind me and my sister Nancy that she never wanted children. And that was, she took no shame or reluctance in making that known to both myself and Nancy, and frankly, her friends. Whereas my father, he never said such things pro or con, but in retrospect, while Dad was a good guy, and I was never abused, and he always provided for the family, he never should have had children. He didn't have the foggiest idea of what he needed or he needed not to do with raising a child.
I think, with the way that you express that your mother would frequently say that she didn't want children, I mean, to me, that goes a long way of explaining your view of adults back then. I mean, she was at the tip of the spear, but...
That alerted me, I'm sure. But frankly, Marshall, my philosophy indicates that whatever abstract idea you come up with, you accept, reject, whatever, ultimately it has to be tied back to some event, to your perceptions, to real things that happened that you can recall and relate. And when I've tried to do this with why I had the attitude I did, I can come up with things like this, but they don't necessarily explain the enormity of my contempt for virtually all adults. That worked against me from the start. It didn't my friends because they weren't adults yet.
Yeah.
But eventually I had to face that recognition, and of course part of my story and how that came about is in my book for Jesse and Mia and Ava to read. Now see, this has been good. Now, you've gotten me into the next book because what I'm talking about here, I'm dealing with this sort of thing in concrete details in the next book, and I don't think, while I think Jesse and Mia and Ava will enjoy the conversation, some of the ideas that I'll be talking about, get on with the story.
Well, I didn't have any illusions that we were going to do this in chronological order as the book was written.
Okay, so the editing can take care of all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, Mom and Dad, by mid to late 1941, they had met and were dating. And as the title of my first chapter, One Notch Apart, indicates, they lived on opposite sides of a mountain range in in northern New Hampshire called the White Mountains. And so I have few details on their relationship at that time. The only thing I knew about was that Mom said Dad was a good dancer, and Dad had indicated that he liked to leave North Woodstock because nothing was going on there. Now, I've been to both towns, and for him to say that nothing going on in North Woodstock, but there was something going on in Littleton, it had to be that it was only my mom going on in Littleton, because there's nothing going on there either. These were two small, very rural, where life was hard. Winters were brutal, and they recalled that, and I've recalled some of it in that chapter of the book. One of the things that I regret not asking my father is why, with him in love with my mom, and apparently she with him, by whatever definition they had for such things at that time, when the war broke out, Dad decided to enlist in the Army. He wasn't called up, but he enlisted. And to this day, I don't know what motivated him to do that. I can only infer what it must have been, because I think in retrospect, his mother and father depended on him for some of the work around the house and cabins, which they had in North Woodstock, that they rented to teachers at the small little college there. That was how they earned their living, and I think that his mother and father depended on him. And yet here he goes and enlists in the Army to get out of New Hampshire. Because once he enlisted, they moved. They didn't sell the place, but they moved south to Rhode Island, where they rented a place for the rest of that winter. In either 41 or 42, I don't remember which. 42 or 3, I don't remember which. Because he enlisted in 42, I know that, right after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And he essentially never went back there. Now, I did, and his mother and father did, but they would go back after that for only the summers. They wouldn't stay for the winter. And I, as a young boy, accompanied them, and that's in my book, and Jess and Mia and Ava will relish that part, because I really relished going to New Hampshire.
Before we move on, the way you told that story, it kind of sounded like perhaps he enlisted to get out of work.
Perhaps.
Although, the timing might suggest that he, felt a sense of duty.
Well, knowing my father, I don't think the latter was the case. I would be yielding to the temptation of painting him in a better light than I think he should be painted. Like I said, my dad, he was a provider. I was never abused, mistreated, or anything. But the bottom line is, I don't think I ever really loved my father, or for that matter, my mother. I reserve love for special people, and neither one of them qualified. Now, I will acknowledge that it's difficult to separate duty and obligation because, frankly, they raised me, for better or worse. And I have become who I have become in part, and I don't just want to say the bad parts, but in part attributable to them. But again, I don't think he did it out of a sense of patriotic duty. He may have done it out of some duty that I don't understand, but I think he preferred just to get out of North Woodstock. That would be my guess.
When I was reading that part of your draft, it reminded me of my uncle, who I guess was a little aimless when he was, a very young adult. I've always known him kind of as the cut up of the family. He was the one aunt or uncle, that the kids always gravitated to. But when he was younger, I guess he got fed up and said, "Well, I'll show you. I'm going to enlist." And they shipped him out to Guam.
Wow. Well, when Dad enlisted, I don't think there was any such thing as the Army's ski troops. Bob Dole, I've read, was the instigator or the leader of that part of the Army, and was responsible for setting up Camp Hale in Colorado, and then staffing it with some great skiers and training the ski troops, because they were expecting in World War II to eventually invade Germany, Italy, whatever, and have to fight in the mountains, in the Alps, or in the other mountain ranges associated with the Alps. And they realized they didn't have anyone in the Army capable of doing that. So I don't know the details of this, but after Dad had enlisted, and it was found out that he was a great skier, they immediately transferred him to Leadville to be among the ski troops being trained, or maybe even, I don't know this for a fact, so I hesitate to say it, but he at one time indicated that he was a ski instructor in the 10th Mountain, and he was good enough skier to do that, for sure. Him and his buddy Norman Palmer that was his friend growing up in North Woodstock, they would occasionally hike up Mount Washington, because there were no ski slopes there or tow ropes or anything, and ski a place called Tuckerman's Ravine, which I'm told is like double black, downhill, long run, and it amounted to one run a day. And him and Norman would occasionally do it after driving there. They normally apparently skied in Franconia Notch that separated Littleton from North Woodstock in New Hampshire near their house, and that was an established ski area. Cannon Mountain is what it was called. But yeah, he became a ski instructor, and of course, in the book I describe how Mom, after he had left, came out by train to join him out there, and they were married in Glenwood Springs, and Dad spent his time at Leadville, and then a brief stint up in Washington on Rainier, and then came back to Leadville and was transferred to Austin before being discharged. Mom married, and I was born at Fitzsimmons in Denver. She lived on Lafayette Street in Denver, and we went by, and she thought she could pick out the house, but she wasn't sure.
Oh, interesting. Well, I guess that was probably a rental, wasn't it? And
she rented from a woman who lived there.
It was not necessarily something that was. I mean, that house, that structure, would not have been something necessarily meaningful to stick in her memory.
No, it wouldn't have been. I think one of the restaurants that she had gone to while there, that was still in Denver when later on in my life I was transferred here by IBM, and they came out to visit me on their 50th wedding anniversary. And we went by at the time, and the sign was still there, or a sign, the Pig and Whistle Restaurant on Colfax.
Oh, wow.
She remembered that and was all excited to see that. And then, of course, when they came out for the 50th, we went to Glenwood Springs, where Julie and I had already been, and we rented the Bell Tower suite at the hotel there, and they stayed in it that night, and the courthouse at Glenwood Springs still had their original marriage license that they had signed. So we got that from the courthouse and gave it to them framed as a memory. They were really shocked and pleased by that. My brother still has that.
Let me ask you this, Dave. Did you develop a stronger relationship with your parents as you were older? And I mean, I know we're really getting out of chronological order, but
that's all right. I mean, I'm getting to understand what this potentially can be and everything. I would say yes and no. The no, because primarily I think how they treated each other. They did not. Mom was very disappointed in Dad, which means she was disappointed in herself. And Dad was disappointed in Mom, which means he was disappointed in himself. Now, here, as we're sitting here talking, and I finished this book, and both are dead, there are certainly a number of things that I wished I had said to both of them, one at a time or together, while they were alive. I did say some things, but it was usually negative. I'll give you an example. Sometime in the 80s, I was flying back to Hilton Head for vacation with the woman I was dating at the time. And we stopped in where my parents lived at the time in North Carolina, which was out of the way, but I wanted to see them. And with my plane, it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jan was, I think she was still asleep or doing something, but a short while after getting there, it turned out to be like every other time I had visited them, either by myself or with someone. After a short period of oh, wonderful to see you, and yet and everything, great to get together and so forth, and what have you been doing and so forth, led by my mother, each would then start whining to me about the other and how difficult it was to have to deal with and put up with the other. And like I said, it was led by my mother. And of course, as their son, not wanting to engage in any of this, I would listen to a point and then move on, get up, leave, whatever. And I remember that for whatever reason on this instance, as she had done this for maybe 15 or 20 minutes on and off, I went and got my father, like I said, Jan wasn't there, and sat him down both at the kitchen table in North Carolina, and I said, listen, I don't come here except to enjoy my visit. And when either one of you start talking about the other one in the way you do, I don't enjoy being here. I just as soon be almost anywhere else. So, I want you to decide, each of you and both of you. Do you want to do what you're doing about discussing the shortcomings of the other more than you want me here? And if you do, I don't want to come here anymore. Now, if you don't, then I don't want to hear any more of it. And of course, the initial reaction from my mother was shock. Oh, David, I can't believe you're saying that. Like she just denied and had no self-awareness whatsoever.
Probably didn't quite even realize that she was doing it, right?
Probably. Well, you're getting into most people, they don't develop enough self-awareness to where they're not both a good friend and a terrible liability to each of us. And that's one of the things in my second book that I'm going to go into in detail. It's something called introspection, where instead of your focus being almost 100% out there, as you're born and become a child into pubescence and then in life, almost all of your focus is dealt with what is out there that you're perceiving, because you have to in order to survive. But at some point in becoming mature, it ought to occur to you that there's also things been going on inside. And in my judgment, I have found that is, as long as your life is secure and you're reasonably content with its level of security, prosperity, whatever, you need to start focusing in here, not out there. Because in here is the key to who you are. The author that awakened my dark and vacuous soul, as I write in the book, one of her axioms was that man is a being of self-made soul. And you make that soul, and then you have to live with it. And you will live with it unless you decide you don't like it and you want to change it. And if that's the case, the only way you can do that is through introspection. And I don't know if that's helpful and where that might appear in this recording.
Well, we never know, right? I guess before we move on, we were talking about your parents, and I've thought about my parents as well, and the relationship that I have, and the behaviors, and some things that we aren't always aware of. I guess, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And I speak to them every week or two, but routinely only see them once a year, up until 2025. But at some point, I recognized that if I wasn't careful, we would kind of fall into the same arguments or the same behaviors.
Sure.
And Dave, it's very possible that I recognized that it must have been 2020, talking about COVID. And I recognized that, every time that COVID would come up and what we should do about it on a personal and individual basis, every time that would come up, well, Shazam, we had an argument on our hands. And I realized that, the fault was mine just as much as it was theirs. So if I wanted to make sure that we had a good, healthy relationship in the limited time that they have left, okay, I'm just not going to bring up COVID.
Sure. I agree. Self-awareness becomes, in my opinion, one of the most important psychological aspects of an adult human being. I mean, it follows on the heels closely of where and what level your self-esteem is sourced. You can't get around it. Must come from inside.
Yeah.
But let's face it, we're all human, and the opinion of someone we value that is praiseful, we like. And so we seek that out and are reaffirmed by that. But we can't ever let that replace our self-esteem that comes from inside. And what you just described is why you'll think highly of yourself. If you're aware you want a good relationship with your parents, as good as it can be, and you're aware of that, and you're also aware of what you need to do to ensure that happens, that builds a strong self-esteem.
Well, it's just like what you said. If you want to change, then you can change yourself any time that you desire. You just have to be able to take that introspective look, assess what needs changing, and what triggers you need to remove from your life, or what habits you need to keep yourself from encountering as you go throughout your day.
That's exactly right.
I guess we should acknowledge that there were dogs walking around here.
Yeah. Well, I've had dogs growing up. When I didn't, I had the neighbor's dog. They loved the neighbor's dog. I remember before I left for the Air Force when I was 17, the neighbor's dog would visit almost every night, and we'd let her in, and she loved coming over. And then when it came time for us to go to bed, we'd go to the door, open it up, and she'd go home. We'd find out that they'd let her in when she came home, the owners.
I just suspect that some of the audio is going to come through of the nails on the hardwood floor.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Well, this has been good, Marshall, because the idea that, and speaking for myself, the idea that I originally had that I would be able to talk on these various subjects in and of themselves, as we proceeded, I think I need to rethink that, because it seems that A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, and then leads to the alphabet. And that's the way my mind works anyway. Probably one of the reasons it was so difficult to write this. What am I going to put in here? What am I going to leave out? But this has been instructive.
Well, what are your thoughts for continuing? What do you want to talk about next time?
Marshall, I think that this is going to be a valuable thing to do. But I had visions of at least one per section of the book of one of those URL codes at the bottom of the page or section. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there'll be a URL code, and it takes you to I don't know how long, video, audio, YouTube, in which I talk about the book. That's my thinking right now after doing this for a half hour, 40 minutes, whatever it is.
Oh, so almost like I would interview you as an author that comes on a show, on a radio show or something.
Because and in doing that, Jesse and Mia and Ava will gain whatever's to be gained, and I'll know that I need to come up with a way, if I want, to give them an appetizer for the second book, but not the main course, if that makes any sense. Because I don't know if they have any interest in the first book, to be honest with you, right? I've sent copies of the draft to Mia and Jesse, but I haven't gotten any feedback yet, except they're reading it. But that's my thinking right now.
Well, I also didn't really quite know how to approach this, full of ideas, but, need to figure out which ones aren't as worthy as others.
Well, I think that to aid in the project, you need to reread the book. I hate to say that, but read the book and then jot down, like you did when you gave me your critique, what you think would be of interest to talk about with me.
Yeah, and that wasn't my aim when I was going through it.
Right. So you do that, and I'm gonna review Francis's critique and what he sent me, and come up with a final version that won't differ and cause you, I don't think, to change your strategy. And we can get together again with maybe a location and a background format, whatever you want to call it, that'll lend itself to the final cut.
Okay.
That sound like a plan?
Yeah. I still wouldn't take off the table doing or having available, say 3 to 5 minutes worth of a edited video that, could be kind of intermixed with the book. If there's something that, say, well, there's really more that I could have said about this paragraph, but I left it out, in the interest of brevity. That those could be sprinkled throughout the book as well.
Okay.
And to me, it seems like the right approach there is to kind of go through and, pick out your, let's say, what the top 5 paragraphs or topics that you might do that to.
Okay. Well, I'll do that when I reread it for sure.
And we sort of went through it, and we started out going in chronological order and quickly kind of got off that road, but...
Yeah, maybe you say, Dave, how did we end up here?
That's right.
Yeah. Marshall, have you ever been married?
Never been married.
You ever come close?
I guess not that close, but sort of close, maybe, perhaps. There was a girl that I met in Taiwan, and we had a relationship. That's the ultimate long distance relationship, right? But we would travel back and forth.
How long ago was that?
Gosh, 2005.
Oh. Were you traveling back and forth for a while?
A number of times, and we worked for the same company, so that gave us the opportunity to travel and see each other. And then I think we both maybe traveled on our own dime a couple of times. And she wanted to get married. I would say that I did too, but I was not willing to until we could have the opportunity to live in the same location for a while and actually do some real dating and discovery and that type thing. So each of us had looked at different times at becoming expats, in the other country, and opportunities to work, and it never quite worked out. There was another who I wished for a long time that we had married, and I think in hindsight it's probably better off that we didn't.
Yeah, well, when you're speaking for myself, Julie is my second wife. I was married and divorced from my first wife, and I call her my practice wife. But she was a good gal. But I married her for the wrong reasons, and I don't know. I can't speak for her. She wanted children, I didn't, and I never gave that enough consideration, and I regret that, because had I given that enough consideration, I likely would have realized before it occurred that I probably needed not to be married to her.
Mm.
It's ironic that when I met Julie, she had a 4-year-old daughter at the time. And, one of the things Julie asked me when I asked her to marry me is, what about Jesse? And the only thing, and see, I never wanted children because of my experiences. I thought I'd make a lousy dad. I didn't want the responsibility, and so I didn't have any interest. And yet, when I had to face the fact that this woman that I just dearly loved had a daughter, well, I had to think about that. So when she asked me that, after I asked her to marry me, the only thing I could say, and I meant it, is, well, I'll treat her just as if she were my own. Now, I didn't know what the hell that meant, right? I'd be good to her, and I'd try and teach her and stuff, but one of my regrets is not being more active in that, because I've always felt that Jesse was Julie's, not mine. And I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have let that happen, but I did.
I'm not quite sure how one could avoid that, unless you just jump in with both feet. And I, thinking about the way you tell your story, well, it made me think it's a good indication that just because you have a desire or lack thereof, it doesn't mean that you've reached that opinion with all the correct data. Right?
Yep.
I mean, you...
Well, that's what introspection is about, right?
Of course, yeah.
That's what it's about. Yeah, I even acknowledge that in the book to him. Had I taken a more active role than I did, Julie and I probably would have had to resolve things that we didn't resolve at that time much sooner.
Do you mean that you would kind of have to have an agreement between the two of you as to how?
Well, we didn't really have an agreement. I just as a default responded to my awareness that Jessie was not mine. That I more or less was added to this family. And of course, her whole family made that more likely too, because it's a very tight knit family with their own views and autonomy. And here I was joining it. And I don't know if her brother and sister's spouse would say the same thing, but I've always felt like that they took charge of their relationships, and Julie took charge of ours more than I did. Now, that may be a surprise to you, but that's only in some ways. I mean, Julie and I, we get into it about all manner of things, and still do. But that's one of my regrets. Jesse's one of my regrets. I didn't. I'll give you a concrete example. One of the things that I have learned in life is credentials may or may not matter. Credentials are something that you earn through the standards of others. And what I mean by that is that when Jessie graduated from high school, I don't think it was ever even a consideration in Julie's mind whether she should go to college or not. It wasn't mine. Now, why is that? Because I have learned by that time in spades that those letters that you earn from going to college do not necessarily mean anything except you put in the time to get the letters and the work. You may be dumber than a dirt and gotten that and perform that way when somebody else responding to you having those letters decides you're the one for their job or task. And I've never believed that. Now, that has come about because if you read my journey, I got where I am through no formal, to speak of, education. Someone once said, there is no teaching, only learning. And that appeals to me because if someone doesn't want to learn something, they're not going to learn it. I don't care how much you teach them. And so I discovered, apparently, while in the Air Force, that I needed to start learning. And that my excuse for not doing so wasn't really valid. That was part of my pathology. But when Jessie graduated, there was no question she was going to college. The only issue was which one, and she had to decide what her major was going to be. Now, in my mind, Jessie had no business going to college. And I may have hinted at that or suggested it, I don't remember. But it wasn't even an issue in Julie's mind. And so I was only going to object to a point. And I wished I'd have objected more. Now, what would have been the result of that? Well, Jessie didn't finish college and instead got married and had two wonderful little kids. Well, if she didn't go to college, those kids wouldn't be here. So I go, okay, well, maybe, I'm conflicted because she did marry Tony. Now, married Tony. She's divorced now. and that marriage is not something she speaks highly of. But would she have gotten married to somebody else just like him if she didn't go to college? I don't know, maybe. But one of my regrets is not putting up stronger resistance in sending Jesse to college.
Yeah, when I read that in your draft, it was pretty powerful. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but I was always supposed to go to college as well. I mean, it was just simply expected. And when I dropped out after my first year, they were going to put me on probation. And like my uncle, I'll show you. I quit. I dropped out with a 1.45 GPA.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I was not quite a pariah, but,
Right.
Oh my God, Marshall's turned out to be a failure.
Right.
So I definitely understand the expectation that family members can put.
Well, my mom and dad were blue collar, day one, remained blue collar with trappings of middle class for the most of their lives, all their lives. And they had 3 children. I'm the oldest. Nancy's 11 years my younger, and Scott's 17 years my younger.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sure that in my mom and dad's mind, because they wanted to be white collar, strived to be all their lives, and lived well. They ended up living well, earned good money, and enjoyed some of the finer things in life, vacations and cars and other things. They wanted each of their kids to go to college because neither of them did. And they knew that that was seemingly the gateway to a better life. Now, because of me and who I was by the time I left school at 16, they knew I wasn't going to college. And then essentially my sister displayed to them that she wasn't going to college. And lo and behold, Scott, the youngest brother, he went to college because he earned the grades and had the demeanor and behavior and everything. And they sent him to school in Rhode Island, and he has a degree. And he's successful. He's essentially he's the guy that the mortgage lender turns to make sure the underwriting is sound. And he's done that most of his life and been very successful at it.
Well, and that's probably the type of thing that you could learn to do without having a college education. But it's, that's the check mark that companies need you to have.
I can do that right now with someone coming. If they came to me and said, Dave, should I make a loan to this person for this amount? I could do that. Now, what I couldn't do, and would have to be shown what was needed, was what are the little boxes that need to be checked that is a standard for checking to make such a loan. And that without them being checked, well, the loan was poorly made if it goes bad. If it doesn't go bad, no one says a thing.
Yeah.
So, and that's what Scott has. He definitely is able to do that. He's well regarded, apparently, in underwriting.
You reminded me of something else a minute ago, which is that it occurred to me that I felt like I didn't learn how to learn until I was in my early 20s. So in high school, right, just kind of bouncing around. And, well, actually, I put this in my email to you when we were talking about the notches and the gaps. I was just always taking the path of least resistance, no matter what, what's the easiest route that I can take here? And, that first trip to college, was not motivated, had no goals in mind, nothing that I was working toward. Ironically, my major was computer science, and I hated it. and yet, that's what I would do for the remainder of my life once I actually got a degree and learned how to learn. And then when I went to University of Kentucky and got to a point to where I really enjoyed the classes and the content and, that something special that you get out of, learning something just brand new and discovering how things work. That was really kind of a pivotal point in my life, and I was able to learn other things. Realize that I could learn other things that weren't necessarily academic. I was slightly athletic. So okay, how can I learn how to ride my mountain bike better? It's not just simply sitting on the seat,
Right.
with two wheels underneath you,
Right.
or skiing. It's another good one. So,
Well, it's 11 o'clock, Marshall.
all right.
I think we then need to start tearing down. Will this become available to look up and watch and listen to?
Well, I guess maybe I should ask what your preferences are. I mean, I still envision slicing this up into smaller pieces.
Okay.
I can make the whole thing available to you as well, and one
Slice
big
it
thing.
up.
Okay.
Slice it up and do the piecemeal thing.
Okay.
And I can watch them that way.
Yeah. All right.
Sure.